We continue to see much talk but little action from this bread and circuses government. 1 in 3 children have had contact with the child protection system before they turn 18. It has been reported that in South Australia it is predicted that without change by 2031 there will be as many as 140 of every 1,000 Aboriginal children in state care. As of 30 April 2024, there were 4,853 children and young people in care. The figure from the 31st of March was 4,883 and was coined as being highly likely that this is the highest number of children and young people in care by the Chief Executive, Jackie Bray. No matter what way you cut it, this figure is unacceptably high. At a recent Budget and Finance Committee meeting, we heard that in comparing South Australia with the number of children in the child protection system per capita compared to other Australian jurisdictions, that we are the second highest figure for all jurisdictions. We have seen review after review under this government, but while we continue to wait for action from these reviews, vulnerable South Australians are stuck with status quo. As lovely as a review is, and we do welcome the opportunity to identify ways in which the child protection system can be improved, they are merely a tick box exercise if they do not ultimately lead to tangible outcomes. The perfect example being the review of the Children and Young People Safety Act. We sit eagerly and await any draft legislation from the review of the Children and Young People Safety Act. The final report for this review of the Act was provided to the Minister in February 2023. Acting President, you heard that right, 2023. The Minister has been sitting on this report for over a year. The Parliament will soon break for midwinter break, meaning that this place will not see any bill to address these issues until the end of August or start of September earliest. That leaves only 7 sitting weeks, if you don't include the optional sitting week, for the Minister to make these changes if she gets her skates on. If she doesn't, vulnerable South Australian children and the child protection community more broadly will be left with coal under the Christmas tree from Minister Hilliard and told to wait until next year. Every day we wait is another day that vulnerable children and families in the child protection system are at risk of facing the same preventable, heartbreaking tragedy that we've seen time and time again. Children are our most vulnerable in our community and they need our protection. They rely on the government to be able to make the tough calls and to get on with the job. The opposition has been calling on the Premier to dedicate a standalone child protection minister, a minister who would be able to give this portfolio the time and attention that it needs. Instead, we see a part-time child protection minister who's juggling her time with Live Golf, Gather Round, Adelaide 500, the list goes on with this bread and circuses. Government, yes, horse racing. We all know this government loves their sports, and they've had a real focus on it since 2022. But the reality is that the minister who is charged with this very busy sporting schedule is in fact the child protection minister. Instead of taking the opportunity at the recent cabinet reshuffle to ensure there is a standalone child protection minister, the Premier instead decided to appoint an assistant minister for junior sport participation, giving Minister Hilliard more support in her sports portfolio. That tells you all you need to know about this government's priorities, Acting President. There's a child protection crisis, and what does the Premier do? He throws more at sport. The Premier no doubt has members of his caucus languishing on the backbench hoping for the call-up, who would have been happy to pick up the slack from the Child Protection Minister. I think the Honourable Russell Wortley would have happily picked up the phone. As we await tomorrow's budget, I for one hope that this government gives the focus needed to the child protection system, but make no mistake, throwing money at child protection will create no outcomes on its own. It's time that we have a dedicated child protection minister, someone whose sole focus is the increased safety of vulnerable South Australian children.